So this year, Omega marks 75 years of its anniversary for the Seamaster collection, and we thought we'd catch up with the ever so passionate and knowledgeable watch collector, Gregory Selch, to help us dive deeper with a part of his collection. So hi, Greg, and welcome back to another episode of the Collector's Corner with the Hour Markers.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to talk about Omega, one of my favorite companies.
So when people talk about the Seamaster, it's generally about it being a tool watch and how deep it can dive, etc., etc. But there's so much more to the Seamaster.
The Seamaster, of course, is one of the brands, one of the lines that Omega has. I don't know exactly when it came into being, but they are considered to be, let's say, more waterproof, more weather resistant. That's the concept. It goes way beyond that. I've seen dress watches that say Seamaster, but it's really one of their most popular lines, along with the Speedmaster, which is also a different line. But I brought a few watches to talk about, and the first two actually are both divers, and people know them, I think, well. They're Seamaster 120 and a Seamaster 300. These two watches are the 120 and the 300 would refer to the depth that they could go to, something like meters or feet or something. It's not really important. Nobody dives that deep ever. If these watches ever go in salt water, it's very rare, but they can. They're very good watches. The Seamaster 120 is a smaller watch, but it's actually like essentially the same size as a Rolex Submariner, essentially, with a different kind of look and everything, but beautiful bracelets and everything. And the movements, whether they're manual wind or automatic, are just beautiful. They're usually copper plated, beautiful, corrosive proof and things like this. Great watches.
Really, really vintage, old. If I'm not wrong, I think it was in the 1960s when the Seamaster 120 was introduced. A more elegant, so to say, dress version for the Seamaster collection.
Yes, and later they went bigger, but the outset they were smaller watches. Understanding that in the 1950s, diving watches were not normally very big. I mean, some were Italian, like Panerai and things. They were big, but most watches were small because if you dive, things actually look bigger through water, and so you don't need to have as big a watch. On the other hand, you need a big watch that is going to be able to take a lot of, and you might have to turn something with your hands. But these watches are fantastic, and I wanted to say that Omega is one of the greatest companies, in my opinion, to collect, especially for people who don't know a lot about it, because there's a lot of information out there, and they made millions and millions, not only just watches, they made, I think, tens of thousands of different lines, different models and things. And almost all of them you can find out a lot of information about because they sold them all over the world. They were a huge company. And there's a book which you can post some pictures of it, but it's an Omega book that they put out with almost every single model, almost every single, with a description and all kinds of information. Any other brand, it's almost impossible to find that much information in one book. So it's a great place to start if you're collecting, to get information. You can find things online, and there's a lot available, a lot of variation. Next, I have something. It's called it's known as a 30T2, 30, the letter T and 2. They did change the movement at a certain point, but originally this was Omega's best watch. It was a very big watch. The one that I have is about 39 millimeters, which, if you can imagine, this is a huge watch. When it was a new watch in the let's say 40s, this was an enormous watch, and its movement is so good. There's a story in the Omega book about of somebody getting this watch and showing his son, and the son just saying, what's so special about this? And the guy opening it up and saying, this is just the greatest movement ever. And you're just thinking to yourself, This is a watch that's built around a movement. It's a great movement, easy to repair. lots of them available, and they're big and beautiful. You can find chronometer grade versions. You can find others, different sizes. I like the big ones. The next one I brought is this Seamaster. It's a tritium dial, so it has little T's next to the Swiss made. This you can see R or T. T is tritium, and it's a kind of a material that they would have used for to glow in the dark. But everything about this watch, from the lugs to the crosshair dial, it's just a beautiful, beautiful watch. I mean, and it's a Seamaster, so it's very waterproof. Even though it's a snapback, it's very waterproof. These watches are fantastic, and they're not hard to find, but find them in good condition. Try to find them with a dial that hasn't been restored, if you can. But restored is fine, but I prefer them to be original with patina, etc., as you know.
But with the tritium, I think Omega stopped manufacturing and everything with tritium in around around 97. And after that, everything was superluminova. So my question was that you have one of these watches. What if you had to open it up and get it repaired? I mean, is the radiation a problem?
No, tritium is actually not very radioactive. No, everything's radioactive. I don't know if there's somebody I follow on Instagram who's actually a scientist at the University of Illinois. He's a great guy. He's studying outer space. I mean, he's a PhD. He has all these things, and he did a study with a Geiger counter to study the power of the radiation from different watches, especially what they call like the radium dial watches, which, if you're a Panerai fan, which I think you are, you know a little bit about how much radium they did use to make these things glow. These things glowed in broad daylight. They were very, very hot in the sense of glowing. Okay, radiation is what we get from the sun every day. That's what gives us the sun tan, or it's how things grow. It is radiation is powerful. It can be dangerous, but it's just powerful. Okay, so the fact is, what he did with the Geiger counter is he found out that even a banana has radiation coming from it. It will click on the Geiger counter. A banana, a watch too, more or less. Radium is not something that we should be terribly afraid of, unless we are actually, in my opinion, I mean, people will disagree with me, unless you're actually licking the paintbrush that you put it on with, or ingesting it, or breathing it in. This would be a very, very bad idea. But having it on your wrist or something like that is probably not going to do too much. Tritium is pretty neutral, so it doesn't have much, and that's why they switched to it at a certain point. There are other things that they did, but superluminova is very bright, and it's blue. A lot of it is blue, so kind of nice. It's not a Seamaster, but it has no name on it, but it is a doctor's chronograph. It's in rose gold, but what I loved about it when I saw it was the lugs are huge, and they actually match the big, huge, we call them beefy lugs or big lugs, that would be on a normal, a regular Seamaster. So a Seamaster has these very, very big lugs that make it look like it's rugged and it's can take it. Here's a beautiful dress watch in gold that has the same lugs, and inside it has a caliber 320, which is a 2-counter version of the 321, which is what they used in the original Moonwatch. It's a famous movement. Omega even reintroduced it recently. So this has the same movement, and around the outside of the dial, it has something called a pulsations dial. The pulsations would let you know, depending on what category, how many beats your heart is going. So that's how you know it's a doctor's watch. You take somebody's pulse, and you can count off how many pulsations using the stopwatch, and it'll tell you in a split second how fast their heart is beating. It's just a trick. Nobody's ever, I mean, doctors rarely would use that, but it's a really neat trick. This is the Speedmaster that I brought. It's a 1969, 68, 69, but it has it has no markings on it that say first watch on the moon or anything, because they hadn't gone to the moon yet. And it's got the later movement, which is the caliber 861. Both of these movements were made by a company called Lamania that were owned by Omega entirely. And they're a separate company, but it's an 861 as opposed to the earlier moon watches. And one of the things I wanted to say about this for collectors, this watch, the Speedmaster, is, to me, perfect. Why? Because, like if you were buying a diamond, if you bought a diamond and it's 2 carats or greater, there's a certain price that you pay based on the color and clarity. But there's a certain price you pay when it's 2 carats or over. But what if you buy a diamond that is 1.98 carats? It's a lot cheaper. Does it look the same? It looks the same as something that's 2 carats. It's 1.98, but the price is a lot lower. Buying a moon watch, a Speedmaster, or if you like, a watch with 2 instead of 3 subdials, will be a lot cheaper for getting the same thing as everybody else wants. A caliber 321 Speedmaster with 3 everything. They want all that stuff. You're going to pay a premium price for what everybody else wants. That's how the market works. If you buy one with an 861, which is what they use now, it's still in operation. It's a great movement. I think it's more reliable, to be honest. It's cheaper to fix than a 321. If you buy that with the same watch, it's a lot cheaper. And I'll wear this all day long. I don't want to sell this watch because it's not valuable in the sense of it should be in a safe or something like that. It's a watch I can wear every day.
See, there you
So
go.
that's a little
Collect knowledge before you start collecting watches, because this is an interesting piece of information and a very cool comparison to the diamond. It's so true. I mean, who can
Yes.
tell 1.98 carat? So, yeah.
And jewelers know that if they're smart, and of course, people in the business. It's the same with watches. Personally, if you can look a little bit on the margins and stay away from what everybody else is doing, it's one of the reasons what you and I had talked about this before. One of the reasons why Omega, for instance, is such a great watch to collect. I'm not knocking anything else. They're all great. I love Rolex. I love Eberhard. I love Universal. All these companies are some of my favorites. I love Movado, Zenith. But Omega is one of the greatest because they were essentially competing with all of these companies at the same time. So if you can find something that is exactly like a Submariner from the early 60s, try to find an early 60s unrestored Submariner, Rolex Submariner with the original bracelet, etc., for something that's a reasonable price that somebody could afford. And you don't know if it's been fixed, if it's been done. But on the other hand, their Omegas, Seamaster 120s, all day long, or 300s. Rolex didn't even make anything like that. It's much bigger. It's much more durable. It's much more of a serious watch. And they are much, much cheaper because of the fashion element and the desirability. So that's the way the market works is, desirability makes the price go up. Rarity makes the price go up. But if you can get rare that is less well known, the prices are lower.
Yeah, it's interesting, Greg, because you have watches right now, like the Seamaster, the Doctor's Chronograph, for example. It's, if I'm not wrong, it's from the 40s or 50s.
Yes. It's
Really,
engraved, so it says 1955, I think.
1955, exactly. And now, this year, for example, like I mentioned, Omega celebrating 75 years of the Seamaster. So much evolution, so many changes to the watch, to the dial, to the movement. What are your thoughts on the new collection?
I love the new watches. A couple of years I bought a watch just because I thought it's like ironic. I like ironic things, as we've talked about before, but it was a very big, I don't know if it's 45 millimeter. It's a giant watch. Maybe I'll post a picture of it, but it's got a coaxial movement, which is something that Omega spent absolute fortune to develop this movement. And what did it do? Oh, I'm sure it cut a little bit of friction down or something. These watch movements, it's a great movement. And I just thought I want to get one of those with the movement, and I want to get something that's different. And what it is essentially it is a Speedmaster like Panerai size. It's so fun and cool. The new Omegas, the quality of the cases, etc. It's a huge company. I mean, it's not fair to compare these companies like Swatch Omega to Rolex to Richemont. These are huge, huge companies. But within those groups, Omega, like Swatch, the Omega part of Omega, it's enormous. And it is really their premium line. So they tend to spend more money on, I think, the finishing, the quality. They're doing a lot of reproductions, but they are not reproducing these old movements with all the problems that the old movements had. They're using modern lubricants and techniques of making things to make them better, which is fantastic. So I'm a big fan. Omega is one of the great companies. They all are. They're really so much value. It's hard to understate how much a watch used to cost. A watch in the 1930s might have cost, let's say, $120, and that was, you'd say, oh, $120 for a chronograph. That's nothing. Well, imagine that a car costs $500. Now compare the price of a watch, a regular watch you just need because you need to tell time.
Yeah.
At 20% of the cost of a car, right? Or more, 25% of the cost of a car. But a car costs what, $50,000, $60,000. There's no comparison. Watches are much cheaper for what you get.
Yeah.
My opinion.
Yeah. So there we have it. Greg, thank you once again. I think what I take away from here is to find the balance between the hyped watches and the rare watches and look for that special timepiece. Basically collect knowledge before you collect watches, like you always say. Guys, as always, you can head on over to the hour markers, the website, to read more about Greg's collection. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe to our channel if you like what you see. And stay tuned for many, many more of Greg's videos. Greg, thank you once again. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you very much.